At Christmas dinner, my wife's family tried everything to provoke me. They prodded at my work, my clothes, the way I cut my steak, each jab wrapped in a joke so that if I reacted, they could call me sensitive. I had learned to smile through it. They had no idea what I had really become, and I had never needed them to know. When my wife's brother Brandon leaned forward with that lazy smirk and accidentally tipped his glass so red wine bled down my shirt, the table went loud with laughter. I stood up, nodded as if I accepted the joke, and wiped the stain with my napkin. Then I took out my phone and made the one call I had promised myself I would never make unless they forced my hand. Before we continue, thank you so much for your support. Every like, comment, and view means the world to us. We're on a mission to reach our first 1,000 subscribers, and we'd love for you to be part of that journey. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and let's grow together. Now, let's proceed. It's time, I said. Begin the process. I ended the call and sat back down without a word, while the last of their laughter cracked and fell silent on the china. They kept eating, pretending they weren't staring at the door. They asked who I called, because people like this only understand what they can see. I didn't tell them about the 2 years of quiet preparation, the nights I studied their supply chains and credit agreements while they mocked the small business I used to run. I didn't mention the fact that 7 months ago, through a stack of holding companies with bland names, I had acquired the senior debt on Brandon's import and distribution firm. Or that 4 months later, I bought the debt on my father-in-law's property LLC, the one that owned 3 of their warehouses, at a discount from a lender that had grown impatient. I didn't tell them that I had negotiated with their primary bank to move their receivables into a springing lockbox arrangement, or that I had perfected a security interest over the assets they bragged about at barbecues. I only said, you should have stuck to napkins and jokes. The doorbell rang. 2 men and a woman stepped in. My counsel, my receivership officer, and the representative from the bank that had become my closest ally. They were polite to a fault. People who hold real power rarely need to raise their voices. Ms. Patel, the receiver, introduced herself and placed a neat stack of documents on the sideboard, careful not to stain them with gravy. My mother-in-law Evelyn gave a laugh that tried too hard. This is dramatic, even for you, she said. I turned the stack toward Brandon, whose phone had begun buzzing on the table. You'll want to answer those, I told him. Your covenants were tested this quarter. Your leverage ratio failed by a mile. Cross-default clauses aren't decorations. They're tripwires. Brandon's face twitched as he picked up the call, breathing shallow as he listened, his eyes jumping from the receiver's badge to the letterhead to his wife's face and back to me. The documents were simple, if you spoke their language. Notice of default under Section 8.2. Demand for immediate payment of all obligations. Appointment of receiver over assets covered by the security agreement, including inventory, equipment, accounts, and general intangibles. Direction to the company's banks to sweep cash from operating accounts into the lockbox, effective immediately. A letter from North Crown Beverages, once their anchor supplier, now a portfolio company of mine, terminating their preferred terms and switching to cash on delivery for any future orders. A notice to their largest customer that payments should be made only to the lockbox to avoid double liability. No threats, no insults, just facts and dates and signatures. When Brandon hung up, the color had fallen out of his face. They froze the line, he said to no one. The bank froze the line. Why would they? He stopped and looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. The next call hit his father, Joseph, who had owned things for so long he thought ownership was a personality trait. He stepped away to the hallway, pretending he needed the restroom, and returned with a jaw clenched tight enough to crack a walnut. Our rent payments just got redirected, he said to Evelyn. The buildings, our escrow, something about a lockbox control agreement. I let him finish, then pushed a second stack toward him. Your property LLC pledged those rents as collateral, I said. When you fell behind on the amended DSCR test and covered it with a misrepresentation in your compliance certificate, you created a material adverse change. Your lender sold me the note. I didn't accelerate it then. I waited. I warned you, quietly, Through your accountant. You called it noise. Joseph swallowed and looked at my wife, as if she could translate. She just stared at me, and in her eyes I saw the memory of every time I had asked her to stop inviting me into rooms where I was only there to be mocked. Evelyn tried on her old cruelty like a favorite coat. "So what is this?" she asked. "You bankrupt the father of your wife because your shirt got dirty?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "I bankrupt no one. I enforce agreements you signed because I finally accepted who you are. This isn't about a shirt. It's about years of you teaching my wife that humiliation is love, that silence is my place, that your dinner table is a stage where I should juggle gratitude and shame for your applause. I built something while you rehearsed lines. I learned the cost of leverage while you counted borrowed money. Tonight is simply settlement day." I turned to my wife and softened. "I told you what could happen if they pushed. I told you I wouldn't start a fight, but I promised I would end it." She said nothing, but her hand, beneath the table, slid toward mine and stayed there like a truce she wanted to believe in. Brandon tried to rally. Men like him always do, because bluster is the last asset they think can't be seized. He stood, pointed across the turkey as if it were a courtroom, and declared that he would sue, that he would call the press, that he would tell everyone I had stalked his family like a vulture. "You're a parasite," he hissed, the word trembling as his phone buzzed again and again. "You came into our family to strip us." I leaned forward and kept my voice even. "A parasite hides. I filed UCC ones in the open. Your counsel received them. The press will learn that you were 3/4 late on remittances, that you misreported EBIT to mask a ballooning short-term payable, that your own board, yes, the rubber stamp one, passed a resolution authorizing forbearance you breached within a week. I don't need to smear you. I have math." His mouth opened and closed without sound, his eyes cutting to Joseph, who could only shake his head slowly, the realization finally crossing the room. Phones started lighting up farther down the table as reality rippled outward. Brandon's operations manager texted that the warehouse doors wouldn't open. The access codes had been reset by the property manager at the receiver's instruction. A driver sent a photo of a distribution yard with trucks idle behind a chain, a security guard holding a sheet of paper with the word "notice" in fat, unavoidable letters. The bank's cash management portal pushed an alert that the sweep had begun. Every dollar in, routed to the lockbox, every vendor payment blocked without receiver's countersignature. North Crown's regional director called Brandon to say the pallet scheduled for the 27th would not leave until payment hit. There would be no exceptions, not for the holidays, not for history. My counsel, Mr. Adler, spoke softly to no one in particular. "We will, of course, protect employees. Payroll accounts remain funded through the week. The receiver's objective is continuity of business, not carnage." He looked at me. I nodded. Revenge tasted cleaner when workers weren't made collateral damage. I turned back to my wife. "This is where I draw the line," I said. "Not to hurt you, but to stop letting them hurt us." Her eyes were wet, but there was strength in the way she held my gaze. "Will you destroy them?" she asked, and the question wasn't about money. I thought of the late nights they had pushed her to pick sides, of the way she came home leaning small for air. "No," I said. "I'll give them a choice." I addressed the table again. "You'll have two options. 1. Sign a restructuring agreement tonight. You step down from day-to-day operations, bring in a professional COO the receiver approves, and contribute your personal dividends to debt reduction until the ratios hold for a year. You issue a public apology to your staff for the misstatements. You apologize to my wife, here, for the years of disrespect. 2. Fight, and I accelerate both notes, foreclose, and sell to the highest bidder before New Year." I don't bluff. Silence settled like weather. Evelyn looked at the ceiling as if a kinder god would write an exit on the plaster. Joseph measured the tablecloth seam with his thumb and forefinger, the way men do when they need an anchor. Brandon chewed his lower lip raw. It is hard to teach people that their actions have prices when they have floated so long above the invoice. He finally sat, phone face down, and said he needed time. "You had it," I said. "You spent it on jokes." He twitched at the line, but he heard it. Then he did something I was not prepared for. He turned to my wife and whispered, "I'm sorry." Not to me, to her. It was imperfect and incomplete. It was also the first honest thing I had seen him do in years. "Bring the papers," he said to Ms. Patel, his eyes still on my wife. "We'll sign." I didn't smile. Not because I lacked satisfaction, but because triumph is a poor teacher. While they signed, Mr. Adler explained the mechanics. Amended amortization schedule, oversight on purchasing, mandatory audit by a firm not chosen at a golf course, triggers that would move without my breath. It was all very boring, which is how salvation often reads to people who love drama. When the last signature dried, I stood and folded my napkin, the wine stain now a dark signature on my shirt. "We'll check in next week," I said. "Your teams will get paid. Your customers will get product. You will learn the difference between a family business and a business that happens to include family." I kissed my wife's forehead and thanked Evelyn for the meal, because I promised myself that I would not become them in the spiral of payback. Then I walked to the door with my counsel and my receiver, the night cold enough to make breath visible and honest. In the morning, I woke before the sun and brewed coffee in the quiet of our kitchen. News didn't break, because there was no scandal to sell, but emails went out. Employees learned that payroll was secure and that a new operations lead would arrive on January 2nd. Vendors read that past due balances would be addressed under a court-supervised plan. Customers saw that supply would continue, perhaps even improve, under stricter standards. Brandon sent a message to his staff acknowledging errors in reporting and promising transparency, a word that would either save him or cut him for good. I called North Crown and told them to offer temporary discounts to any retailer willing to stick with us through the transition. Loyalty should be repaid with something heavier than a handshake. Then I called Ms. Patel and reminded her of what I said at the table. Employees are not collateral. She agreed. I knew she would. She liked order too much to let fear run wild. My wife came downstairs while the kettle still whispered and stood in the doorway the way she did the morning after our wedding. Careful and sure at the same time. "You didn't destroy them," she said. I shook my head. "I didn't," I answered. "You can't build a life on ash." She came to me and touched the faint ring the wine had left even after 2 washes, a stubborn crescent that would fade but never entirely forget. "They'll test you again," she said, not as a warning but as a fact. "They might," I said, "but now they know where the lines are drawn." She nodded, and we stood there together, 2 people who had learned that love is not silence and family is not a room where only the loudest laugh. I had made the one call that changed the shape of our holidays, yes, but it wasn't the call that broke a family. It was the call that told them, finally and clearly, the bill had come due. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. Your support means the world to us.